Now to the Middle East, because US Central Command says it has carried out an eighth night of airstrikes against Iran. It described these as in part punishment for Iranian attacks on US servicemen in Jordan. 2 American soldiers were killed in those attacks, the first US troops to die since an initial truce in early April. 1 service member is still unaccounted for. Both the US and Iran have escalated their attacks, striking critical infrastructure. The head of the Gulf Cooperation Council says deliberate Iranian attacks on civilian targets in nearby countries amount to war crimes. Iranian state media have reported damage to bridges and roads in the south, and a water desalination plant was hit in the city of Jask. Our World News correspondent Joe Inwood has the latest.
A US airbase under attack. On Friday night, Iran launched missiles and drones into Jordan. It's impossible to say if these are the ones that killed the US personnel, but the destruction is clear. In a statement last night, the US military said 2 US service members in Jordan were killed in action as US Central Command and partner forces defended against Iranian ballistic missile and drone attacks. Additionally, 1 service member is currently missing. It brings to 16 the US losses in the war with Iran. This was the moment 6 soldiers killed in a previous strike were repatriated. The Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, simply wrote on social media, "Godspeed, heroes. Their sacrifice only stiffens our resolve." The US has been striking targets across Iran for more than a week now, with the focus being Hormozgan province in the south. Here, a bridge destroyed. They say they have been targeting naval infrastructure, weapons storage, surveillance posts and other military infrastructure used to threaten shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. The economically vital waterway has been at the centre of the renewed fighting. Control of the strait is a key Iranian negotiating tool, one the US is keen to deny them. Last night, Iranian TV read out a statement said to be from the Supreme Leader.
Now that the American enemy is seeking to escalate conflict and bear even heavier costs and greater disgrace, it should know that the dear Iranian nation and the resistance front have unforgettable lessons for it.
Neither side is giving any indication they are ready to back down. The news of the first US casualties from enemy fire since April makes peace an even more distant prospect. Joe Inwood, BBC News.
Live now to Dr. Andreas Krieg, an Associate Professor at the School of Security Studies at King's College London. Andreas, thanks very much for your time today. Violence escalating, first US serviceman killed since the truce in April, and seemingly no off-ramp. I mean, how do you assess where we are at the moment?
We're in a very, very dangerous cycle of escalation, one that I would consider to be an escalation trap, because particularly the Americans, but also the Iranians, are trying to find ways to escalate horizontally without doing it vertically. And what happened over the last 2 days is a clear escalation into the vertical space. If you look at the set of targets that the Americans have targeted across Iran, we've seen a much bigger, much more of a widening away from maritime military targets in the south of Iran to civilian infrastructure, including desalination plants, which was an absolute red line for the Iranians. They've made it very clear, to which they then responded yesterday, targeting the Gulf states. And this is the key problem. This is a spiral of escalation between the US and Iran, where the burden of that conflict is primarily borne by the Gulf states, because they're kind of the soft underbelly, if you will, of American defenses. And they don't have necessarily the resilience that the Iranians have, or the resilience that the US troops have in the region. And so the problem here is that a bit more escalation in any direction, horizontally or vertically, is not necessarily a problem for Iran and the US, but it's a major problem for the global economy, and it's a major problem for the Gulf states.
But how much of a problem is it actually for Iran to be alienating these Gulf states, many of which were allies, some of which, including Oman, for example, is important in any attempt at diplomatic resolution?
No, absolutely right. Qatar and Oman are absolutely crucial for the Iranians to climb down from this ladder of escalation. And so they cannot overplay their hand, and they've been really risking overplaying their hand in that respect. We've seen really a toughening of resolve in countries like Bahrain, Kuwait, the UAE anyway, and potentially even Saudi Arabia. If now the response to this current line of American escalation is a targeting of civilian infrastructure more broadly across the GCC, the Gulf states, we will likely see a renewed effort to build a Gulf front to restore some sort of balance of deterrence, which is very difficult to do. We've seen already Kuwait, we've seen Bahrain, we've seen UAE and Saudi using their military force in the previous iteration of this conflict against Iran. It might start again.
Yeah.
The problem that the Iranians have really is if they want this escalation to stop, they need Qatar, they need Oman, and so they know at some point they have to return to the negotiation table. But let me say one more thing: the negotiations are still ongoing, so we shouldn't. This isn't a complete collapse of the MOU, and this is also not a complete collapse of mediation.
Yeah, I mean, you talked there about the Iranian strategy. Briefly, Dr. Krieg, Donald Trump realizing once again it's easier to start a war than to end it. What is his strategy in all of this, and how can there be an American off-ramp?
I don't think Donald Trump has any strategy, because this is war for the sake of war. This is about posturing. It's about changing. What he ultimately wants is changing the terms of the MOU, particularly Article 5 about the Strait of Hormuz. This is not going to happen by military means. There is no military way out of it. The only way out is mediation and diplomacy. And the problem that the Iranians are facing is very similar as well. They're not changing the terms of the MOU. Ultimately, we need to return to some freedom of navigation. Again, here, the Omanis will play a very crucial role as they hold the southern corridor in the southern part of the Strait of Hormuz.
Dr. Andreas Krieg from King's College London, fascinating to get your thoughts. Thanks very much.